Mountain Center Garage. Today we're here with our 2023 Skidoo Turbo. This is called the G5 chassis. The old chassis that this one replaced was a G4. Made a number of videos on the G4 chassis on how to remove the hood and the muffler and a few other things on how to work on your sled. And I thought I'd start off with the G5 and just doing some simple stuff because it's a little bit different on how to pull the hood off, how to pull the muffler off, do a video on belt deflection, and there's been a lot of issues about the chain case the last few months since the G5's been out, which middle of February 2023. G5's been out for a while. It's really been a phenomenal sled. If you had a G4, the G5, just in the way the chassis is a much bigger upgrade from the G4. The G4 was good, but the G5 is just better. And then the power from the G4 Turbo to the G5 is just so much better. I mean, my G4, I had some tunes on it, and I always thought in the stock form for a stock turbo, it was a little anemic. The G5 with the extra power they put in it has just been phenomenal. So anyway, I wanted to show you just how to do some simple stuff. Removing your hood is a simple thing, so I want to do that. And then how to remove your muffler. Those are two things that the average guy should be able to do in his own garage. If you want to look at anything under the hood, check out any of the parts under there. If you want to install anything as far as electronics or look at anything under there just to see, check your exhaust springs. I've seen a number of sleds with the exhaust springs break, where the muffler or where the head pipe goes into the turbo. Those springs have been breaking quite a bit. Pretty much every one we've taken apart has had one or two broken springs if you have 300 or 400 miles on it. So we're going to start off pulling the hood off. Pretty simple process. The G4 was pretty simple, but the G5 is even simpler. They refined the process a little bit. Pretty much 4 screws, and then the screw that tightens the band on to hold the air intake from the hood to the intake on the turbo. Those 5 things are really the only things you have to take off to be able to pull the hood off. And so we're going to get going on that. So the first thing we need to do to pull the hood off on this is there's a cover up here on the dash. So if we come up here on the dash, this cover, you just put your finger in there and you slide it back that way, and then you can just lift that up and that cover pops off. And then you got to unclip. There's 2 nicely positioned wiring harness wires here. It's got a little push clip right here. Push on that one, pull it back. This one's got another little push clip, pull that one back. And then this Torx bit here and this Torx bit there, we both got to take both of those out. So we're going to pull off both of these screws. And I tell you right now, when you take these little screws out of here, these aren't steel screws. I think they're made out of aluminum. They're really soft. So the little Torx heads on there can get stripped out really easy if you're using power tools to loosen these or tighten them. The other thing is if you drop this down your engine compartment, you're not going to be able to retrieve it with a magnet because a magnet doesn't stick to these. So be really careful with these when you're installing them and taking them out because they're just made of such a soft metal. You could strip the threads really easy, or you can strip the Torx head really easy on these. We've got the 2 screws off the top of here. We got our electronics undone. We've got to pull our side panels off. And as you probably know, if you've taken this apart, this side panel just unhooks, comes off by itself. And then your clutch panel, got a little rubber clip clamp there, a little rubber then there, clip there, and then one other rubber strap there. And this thing just kind of pulls straight off. It's kind of hard and tricky to get out sometimes. And that just kind of pulls straight off. To get in here, you're going to have this screw here that you need to untighten. So this is the intake, comes off your hood down here into this that flows air back into the intake boot on your turbo. So you're going to have to loosen this so you can pull this apart. This is a little easier to get to and put back together than the old G4 was. So this makes it a lot simpler to get this in and out. So loosen that. You don't have to take that screw out. You just need to loosen it. And then there's one of these same Torx screws on each side of the hood here. On the other side, we need to pull off. We're going to pull the other side panel off, and then we can just slide our hood forward and get this off. You have to remember, when you put these back on, the ones here, the screws that come off the hood here, have this little aluminum washer on them. The ones that come off the hood up here don't have a washer on the ones that come off up here. So don't get those confused when you go to put them back on. So then we need to pull this side panel off. There's a clip, another clip there, rubber band there, and a rubber band there. And then this one just comes off just like that. And this whole hood shed should now slide towards me like this. There's 2 plastic clips up here in the front of the hood that hold the front of the hood down here. But this should just like that, and your hood just comes off. It's completely unhooked. If we want to pull our muffler off, like if we want to put on an aftermarket muffler, or if we want to get our chain case cover off, we're gonna have to pull our muffler off. And it's got this kind of sound deadening cover and heat shield. The top one just kind of pulls off. The bottom cover just kind of pulls up and out like that. And then there's one more cover right back in here that pulls up and out there that keeps the heat off the coolant hoses and all the wires and your capacitors and stuff back in there. So probably want to replace all those once you put all this back in, especially this one that keeps all the heat off here. Now, a couple of problem areas we've been seeing with the turbos are these. And pulled a number of these apart, and a lot of these are missing the exhaust springs. There's supposed to be 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. I'm missing one. And if you look down here in the compartment, you can kind of see it down there in the bottom of my engine compartment. I have to get a magnet and pull that out because I don't want that bouncing around in there. It's supposed to be 4 exhaust springs that hook the pipe to the white pipe down here. All 4 of those springs are in place. So I'm going to have to get a new spring to replace this one. And there's one thing that's going to be different when you pull the muffler off a turbo versus a non-turbo. It's this section right here. On a non-turbo, your pipe comes up and goes straight into the pipe that goes down to your muffler. On the turbo, the pipe comes up and goes, this is your turbo right here, and then this is your down pipe that goes into your muffler. And so when we take the turbo muffler off, there's springs down here. We take off this end. We don't mess with this over here at all on the turbo setup. On the non-turbo machine, and I'll show you here in just a second, there's the muffler down here, and it has a pipe that comes up that bypasses all this, and it hooks to your pipe up in this area. And when that does, there's only 2 springs on it versus 4 springs on the turbo setup. There's a cover, a heat shield cover on it, kind of like this, and we're going to go show you on the TV how that looks and how that comes off if you have a non-turbo sled. But that's the only part that's different pulling the muffler off. The rest of the part pulling the muffler off down here on the bottom is going to be the same for the turbo and the non-turbo. Okay, since I don't have a normally aspirated sled here to show you, I'm just going to show you on the TV. So if you pull your hood off, you're going to have your pipe come around here. There's a little aluminum cover here that goes over where your muffler here comes up and hooks into your regular pipe. What you have to do, there's a clamp here and a clamp here. You just pull those clamps off, and then this aluminum shield comes off in 2 different pieces, and then right underneath right here, you're going to have both your springs. And that's the one part that's different if you're doing this on a normally aspirated sled than if you're doing it on a turbo sled, is how you disconnect the muffler from the pipe, and it's right here in this. That's the way it is on a normally aspirated sled. The rest of this is going to be the same. You still have to pull the 10mm bolt on the back of the pipe off that hooks it to the frame. You still have to pull the exhaust temperature sensor plug out and take that off. So anyways, that's the one part that's different on a normally aspirated sled. Here on this. Also, another part we're seeing wearing on this is, you can see down here how this coolant line here has a bunch of wear on it right there. That's a pretty commonplace. So if you pull that heat shield out, and it's going to be, this coolant line is going to be real close here, so you want to take care of that from that rub spot there on that coolant line there. So anyway, let's go back to pulling the muffler off of this. Now, one of the main things that helps you pull this muffler off is way back in here. There is a bolt right there, this gold colored bolt. That's the mount that mounts your turbo and this whole system down to the frame. So if you pull this out right here, the same thing on the G4, pull that out, and that will help you lift this up to get your muffler out. So you got to pull this spring off, that spring off. There's 4 springs, 2 here on the front, 2 on the back side. And then right down in here, this is our temperature sensor for our pipe. And then lastly of all, right down in here, there's this 10mm bolt we need to pull out that's going to hold our muffler down to the frame. So we're going to pull all that stuff off, and then our muffler should just pretty easily slide out of here. You can see down here on our springs that hold our down pipe off our turbo to our muffler, they have silicone on them here. What that does, it keeps the spring from vibrating. When the spring vibrates, it moves up here, and these will eventually wear through and break off. To get these off, you just need a spring puller and pull those, and then springs just come out. Now, before we pull the muffler completely out, there's a couple of things that are going to make this a lot easier that we need to do. First thing is, remember our temperature sensor wire here. We need to free that up so when we pull it out, we don't yank on the wires. So, okay, now if we come down underneath our shot start system here, there's a little wire here that comes off your temperature sensor in your pipe. So you just want to unclip that, pull it out from there. Then up here, you just want to unclip this. That's going to free up that wire, so when we pull our muffler out, this is just going to be free. We don't have to worry about it yanking on something and tearing the wire. And the other thing we have to do is, if we go down in here, there's that 10mm bolt down in there that we need to get out with the spring underneath it to free the muffler up. We're going to come down in here, put our 10mm on there. And we don't want to lose that bolt down in there, so we have to get our magnet down in here, pull the bolt up and out, and go back down there into the spring, because we don't want to lose either this bolt or the spring down that engine compartment when we pull our muffler out. So pull both of those out. Now we're going to pull the bolt out down in there that holds the whole muffler kind of in place and the turbo in place back in here. You're going to want a pretty long extender with the 13 on it. Way back in there, we're going to get this on here. This is another bolt we really don't want to lose down in the engine compartment. So when that's loose, this hose here is going to kind of hold it into place. And then we're going to want to get our magnet again and pull that bolt out. This is a pretty special bolt. You can see it's different because it's only got threads here on this end. The rest of it's just smooth without threads on it. So don't lose that one because you're not going to be able to go to your hardware store and buy you a new one. Okay, now we get everything unhooked. We got our temperature sensor wire unhooked. We got all the springs off here. We got the spring off back in here. Now the muffler should just pretty much almost just pull out. Now if we lift this up, how we took the bolt out of there, lift that up, the muffler already starts just falling out. And so if you just pull it a little bit towards you, it actually comes out easier than the G4 muffler does, just like that. And you can see there's two rubber grommets. There's one there. This one fell back down in the engine compartment, so we want to make sure we want to get that little rubber grommet, put it back in, and don't lose that. So we have both that one and that one. We go put this back in, unless we're going to put an aftermarket muffler in. Now if we're going to put our stock muffler back in, we're just going to kind of show you a couple tips and tricks on how to do that. It's a little harder with the turbo muffler than it is the normally aspirated muffler, because the turbo muffler has all this stuff here. The normally aspirated pretty much just sets in and you can line this up here. With the turbo, you got a little bit more limited space because you got the downpipe here. So a couple of things you have to line up on this to make sure it fits back in perfectly. So you have these little grommets here on the bottom. Those have to go down the hole, and those goes over this and fits over that. And those are a little tight space to get this in there. And then there's this spot right here. This is where this piece goes, fits down on there. This is like the normally aspirated or turbo sled. You have this. But this screw has to go down into this little spot right here. And so when you first put it in, you have to make sure that fits in that hole, and then it drops down to where the threads are. And it's really hard in this little confined space to get this part lined up with that little hole right there. So that's going to probably cause you a little bit of trouble. Now, the other thing that I found makes this a little easier, on the G4s, there was a screw right here instead of a rivet, so you could kind of pull this plastic back a little bit. So if you want a little more room to try and get this in, you can drill out that rivet, then put a rivet back in when you're done. Okay, first of all, want to make sure our wire that goes to our temperature probe is out of the way. And then we kind of get this in like this. And I kind of just angle it this direction. I try and get in the rubber grommet with the post over on this side first. And you got to lift up your turbo a little bit and kind of get that down in there. And then what you can do is, if you come around the back side here, you can kind of see where your rubber back there is going to go down into that post there. And you can kind of guide it and work it by looking at it down in here and get that one in first. Usually once you get this one in, the front one down there just kind of usually just drops in all on its own, that front one down there. And then you're kind of left on your own to line up that where the 10mm bolt goes in right there. Okay, so now we got our muffler sitting back in here. We'll put our wire back in where we took it out from. We're going to put this spring and 10mm bolt back in. We'll put our springs back on here. If we have a non-turbo, remember the springs go up here and then your covers go back on. That's pretty much all there is to it. And then we'll go ahead and put the hood back on. The hood goes pretty much back on in reverse order. There's one little trick to putting the hood back on. So when you put your hood back on, you got this little slot here in the side of your hood, and that's going to hook into this little tab right here. You have one on that side and one on that side of your hood. You got to kind of guide those into place when you're first putting the hood down. You want to put this in, get it started up here around your steering post. And then you want to guide the little tabs here into that hole there. And you can kind of reach under with your fingers here and push those in the hole. Then you can just push the whole thing back in and it fits just like that. You can go around here, you can hook your intake back up, You hook your wires back up right here, your 2 screws here, your 2 screws here, and then you're all done. And then your snowmobile is all back together. You're ready to go ride this. Okay, now we got our sled all back together. The electrical components are plugged in, all the screws and springs and stuff are put on, and we're ready to go ride it. A couple of things I was going to say, a reason I kind of made this video, one, because the hood is a little bit different to take off than the G4, and I made a G4 hood removal video. But the big thing was, we've been seeing a lot of people have failures in their chains and chain cases this year on this, and there's a lot of speculation of why that is, and I'm not really going to get into that in this video. But why I took my hood and my muffler off because I wanted to pull my chain case cover off and really to see what's going on inside my chain case, if I have any broken links or my bottom gear's cracked or what's loose in there. So I'm going to pull that off. I'm going to do a video on that in the next couple of days on how to pull your chain case cover off. I've seen a few people post videos on how to tighten your chain, but they really don't go into how to take it apart and inspect it. So we'll do that. We'll pull the chain case cover off. We'll look at it, see what's in there. We'll kind of look at the parts and what's different with this one and the previous G4, why this one might be having some failures. So look for that video coming up in the next week or so. Then the other thing I want to go over, the owner's manual, it's over 300 pages that came with this, and it does go into some of the stuff we went over today on how to remove your hood and side panels. A lot of really good information on there about how to adjust your suspension, and how to adjust your chain and what kind of oil to put in your chain case and all kinds of different things. So a lot of people just kind of overlook that and never bother looking at it, but it's got some really good information there. It's a pretty good resource. It's been a great snow year here in Utah. I don't know where it's at across the whole country, but we're 200% of normal snowpack for the year, and it's been phenomenal. Every ride has been a good powder day. We haven't really had any bad days this year. I think we've got 20 or more ride days in so far in the last couple of months. So it's been a really, really good year, and can hardly wait to get this sled back out on the snow and get more videos done. So like and share the videos and keep watching them. Thanks for being with us on Mountain Sled Garage, and we'll see you next time.